Today I would be talking about comedy. I would be telling you what would you call a comedy in English literature. This is a general lecture on comedy and we would be talking about various types of comedies. First of all, to what piece of work you would give this definition that this piece of work is a comedy. Then we can say a comedy is a work in which the materials are selected and managed. The stuff is so selected and so managed that it interests and amuses the readers. The characters and their discomfitures are a point of delight, or they engage our attention in such a way that we feel amused, or we feel very light about their discomforts, and in such a way that at the end no great disaster falls upon the characters, and usually the action turns out happily for the chief characters. The term comedy is customarily applied only to drama. It should be noted, however, that the comic form, so defined, also occurs in prose, fiction, and narrative poetry, because the feeling of a comedy, or the feeling of humor, or a sense of humor, or a sense of delight, or a sense of amusement cannot be put into a watertight compartment. We cannot say that only a drama has a comic aspect and the other aspects of literature like prose. In prose we can say essays, short stories, or works of fiction, novels. They do not have any comic element. They do have, we cannot say that they do not have any comic element. They do have comic element, but in literature we um, usually assign this word to dramas. A comedy or a tragedy, we assign these words only to dramas, and in that sense only we have further categorized comedies into romantic comedy, satiric comedy, comedy of humors, comedy of manners, and many other types of comedies too. As first of all, I would tell you what a romantic comedy is. Romantic comedy was very much developed by Shakespeare and some of his Elizabethan contemporaries. It is concerned with a love affair that involves a beautiful and idealized heroine, and sometimes this heroine is disguised as a man. The course of this love does not run smooth, but by the end, both hero and heroine overcome these difficulties and they meet a happy end. Many of the boy meet girl plots of later writers are instances of romantic comedy. Even some of the critics have pointed out that some of Shakespeare's romantic comedies involve a movement from the normal world of conflict and trouble into the green world, the forest of Arden in As You Like It, or the fairy haunted wood of A Midsummer Night's Dream, in which the problem and injustices of the ordinary world are magically dissolved. Enemies are reconciled and true lovers are united. And this phenomena, which is very typical of Shakespeare, is in most of his comedies. And then we have lots of feasts, then we have social rituals of weddings and dance, and in this way, this comic plot which is there in the romantic comedy of Shakespeare, has primitive myths and rituals celebrating the victory of spring over winter. And most of these comedies are played in the background of forest, or played in a natural environment. We have lot many trees growing, lot many flowers blooming, and we have hero and heroines meeting in these forests and writing letters for each other, or they are writing letters on the barks of the trees, or they are giving flowers to each other. And they have the village life, with the life which is, a pastoral life. There are maids, they are maids who have cows, and there are village boys. And in such an environment, in such a circumstances, the hero and the heroine meet from somewhere. They're strangers, they fall in love, and they meet happily at the end of the play. So this was a typical atmosphere which was created by Shakespeare and most of his Elizabethan contemporaries for the romantic comedies which they wrote. And it was basically Shakespeare, and we can say his role was the most important role in developing these types of comedies. Then we can talk of satiric comedies. The second type of comedies in our list are satiric comedies. They attack the disorders of society, and they satirize the violation of the standards of societies, and the deteriorating morals, the manners of the people. We can have Volpone, The Alchemist, and Ben Jonson was the very important writer of these types of comedy. He has targeted the greed and ingenuity of his society, and he has written about the stupid gullibility and racial swindlers, and the greed and grotesquely ludicrous behavior of his age. Both Shakespeare and Ben Jonson have written satiric comedies, and sometimes, to the surprise of the reader, these comedies end unhappily. So, the rider which we carry, that all comedies end happily, in these particular type of comedies, these satiric comedies, sometimes these comedies end unhappily, because as far as Ben Jonson was concerned, he had one and only one motto, that was to satirize the society, and he had an aim to improve or to give lesson to the people of his age. And in order to give a lesson or to improve the people of his age, he made it clear, or he wanted sometimes subtly to give a message to the society, that if you behave like this, or if you all the time flaunt the rules, then what would happen is an unhappy ending. What would happen is disintegration of society. What would happen is disintegration of the character. What would happen is a deterioration of social relations. What would happen is a breakup in marital setups, and what would happen is there would be a loss of faith, loss of belief in love, loss of belief in sacrifice, loss of belief in one's duties, or loss of caring for each other, or loss of higher values of life. And in order to warn his readers, in order to improve his society, he made it clear, or he wanted it so that the readers should be warned and given a message at the end by making these comedies, which were running all the time comically, but yes, not in a very lighter vein, because the sting of the satire is always there in Ben Jonson, and that is why these comedies are called satirical comedies. The sting is or the bite is very profound, and in order to carry on his bite, in order to carry on his sting, he carries it till the end and makes these comedies a sort of unhappy at the end. So here I would like to clarify, or here I would like to extend my argument by saying that it is as a general description of comedy, we say that comedy is a play which ends happily, or which ends happily for the protagonist, or all the actions turn out positively for the protagonist, or all the plots or the complexities of the plots or complexities of the characters or situations, they are resolved at the end and they turn out to be positive for the protagonist. But there are exceptions as well, and these exceptions can be seen in Ben Jonson's satirical comedies, where the end could be a negative end, where the end could be a message, a bitter message to the society, with a with an understanding that society would get a lesson and the society would improve. Then we can talk of the third type of comedy, as we have talked of romantic comedy. If I sum up, then we have talked of satiric comedy, and then we can talk of the comedy of manners. These type of comedies were exemplified. First of all, we can take Shakespeare's example. His Love's Labour Lost and Much Ado About Nothing are basically, we can say they are romantic comedy as well as they are comedy of manners. And then these type of, the comedy of manners was much highlighted by restoration comedy. In restoration comedy, this form deals with relations and intrigues of gentlemen and ladies living in a polished, sophisticated society, and relies for comic effect in a great part on the wit and sparkle of the dialogues, often in the form of repartee, a witty conversational give and take, which constitutes a kind of verbal fencing match, and to a lesser degree on the ridiculous violation of social conventions and decorum by stupid characters such as would-be wits, jealous husbands, foppish dandies. And then we can give example of Congreve's The Way of the World. Then we have Wycherley's The Country Wife. And in these types of comedy, the immorality of the people of that society, their indecency is exposed, and the major writers again are Oliver Goldsmith, Richard Sheridan. They have written sentimental comedies as well. And Oliver Goldsmith's She Stooped to Conquer, and Richard Sheridan's The Rivals and A School for Scandal, they in a very well, they are very well crafted to expose the indecencies of the age, the double standards of the age, the deteriorating standards of the age, and the exhibitionist behavior of the people of that age, and loss of moral values, especially men as well as ladies, men who are all the time playing or spending their money in wine, or women who are all the time gossiping or scandal mongering or talking ill about others, or their favorite pastime is gossip or matchmaking, and they would ridicule or they would talk ill about everyone. There would be not even a single character, as is said about the age, not even a single person or single character who could skip their ridicule. And in this way, they would criticize the whole society while sitting in their drawing rooms. But at the same time they would forget to see themselves. They do not have any mirror to see themselves, and this mirror is shown by Richard Sheridan or Oliver Goldsmith in a very well way, that those who scandalize the reputation of others, they themselves are so much scandalized. They themselves have such loose morals, and most of the characters of these comedies are given the names which suit their characters. So these types of comedies have this typical quality, that most of the characters are also given the same name, which are the epitome of their own characters. So when we have talked of romantic comedies, we have talked of satirical comedies, we've talked of comedy of manners, restoration comedies, or sentimental comedies, comedies of Goldsmith, comedies of Richard Sheridan, then we can in this line we can talk of farce as well, because farce has also an aspect of comedy, just as satire has an aspect of comedy, but satire is more pinching, it's more bitter, and it has an aim to improve the society, while comedy is a lightweight piece of literature. It does not aim, or it does not directly target at improving the society. But in the same way, farce is also one of the ways of giving a comic flavor, and it's a type of comedy, we can say, designed to provoke the audience to simple hearty laughter, which can say belly laughs in the parlance of the theatre. To do so, it is commonly employ highly exaggerated own caricatures, character types, puts them into improbable and ludicrous situations, and makes free use of broad verbal humor and physical horseplay. Farce was a component in the comic episodes of Miracle Plays, and in English drama, farce is usually an episode in a more or complex form of comedy. For example, knockabout scenes in Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew and The Merry Wives of Windsor, or Branson Thomas' Charlie's Aunt, however, an American play of 1892, which has often been revived in a true farce figure throughout. Then we can talk of high comedy. High comedy is a distinction frequently made between high and low comedy. High comedy, as described by George Meredith in a classic essay on the ideals of comedy, evokes intellectual laughter, thoughtful laughter for spectators who remain emotionally detached from the action at the spectacle of folly, pretentiousness, and incongruity in human behavior. We can say that Beatrice in Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, and Mirabell and Millamant in Congreve's The Way of the World have, to an extent, through their intelligence, have passed this note of high comedy. Then we can say that low comedy, at the other extreme, makes little or no intellectual appeal. As the title suggests, it has nothing to do with intellect. It is simply about jokes, about gags, about boisterous, humorous, or clownish physical activity, and that is why it is called low comedy. It is like a comedy in a circus where clowns perform for the audience, and in those clownish scenes, or in those clownish aerobics, there is nothing intellectual, but we can still laugh at their actions. It is more of a physical action and less of mental action. Then we can talk of comedy of humors, as we have already talked of romantic comedy, we have already talked of comedy of manners, we have already talked of sentimental comedy, we have talked of farce, we have talked of high comedy, we have talked of low comedy. Now we can talk of comedy of humors, as the very word suggests, and it has all the qualities, all the four humors or the natures which human beings are composed of. Some human beings are very bitter, some human beings are very melancholy, some human beings are very sad, some human beings are very jovial. So all these types of humors or all these types of elements can be seen in those humorous comedies. Ben Jonson was writers of such comedies. Then some of the Elizabethan playwrights have also written such comedies. So for today, I think if we can concentrate upon what a comedy is, there how many major types of comedies are prevalent in English literature, and what are the typical features of each type of comedy. If we can concentrate upon these aspects, and we can divulge upon these aspects as I have given the introduction and as I have explained in my lecture, it would be very beneficial for all of us. Thank you.